Super excited to have Cooper Boardman on the Ostrom Avenue podcast. Cooper graduated from Syracuse, most importantly, graduated from WAER in 2021. Has gone on to do fantastic things. And Cooper, now you're getting the really super cool experience of calling some college basketball games on ESPN. Of course, this isn't the first time you're jumping into college basketball, but how's it been so far? Working with ACC Network and ESPN.
It's been awesome. It's been fun. It was fun to be back in the dome. I guess that was a couple of weeks ago, and I gotta say, I have to shout out my college roommate Owen Valentine, who
Do it, do it.
him and Brennan Mortensen were the inventors of this podcast, and I think I've listened to like 100,000 episodes of this podcast, either on my phone or like through our bedroom walls on Ackerman Avenue. So to be here is a great honor, and I appreciate it, AJ.
No, yeah, we love that. All the mentions with the Ocean Avenue podcast we can get, the better for certainly. And I think I want to start the conversation here because I think it's interesting. When you were calling the games for WAR and Syracuse men's basketball, people didn't know it, but it was the end. It was the final chapters of the Jim Boeheim era. Now they're starting a whole new book basically with Adrian Autry, and it's featured some ups and downs so far. When you left calling Syracuse basketball games, did you see maybe not the downfall they went on, but the kind of real turbulent years that were to follow?
Yeah, it is interesting because I think, boy, so I'm class of 2021. So my
Yeah,
last experience being around Syracuse basketball every single day
yeah,
is the 2021 tournament run, and that's like out of COVID. We didn't know there was going to be a season. And I thought that season, first of all, was unreal to be a part of. Like, we're in like the
yeah.
COVID bubble tournament deal, like, hotels in Indianapolis. We had to stay there for like 3 weeks. It was awesome. Um, but it encapsulated what that era was like, which is, are we gonna get into the tournament up until the moment that our names are uttered on Selection Sunday? And more often than not, Jim Boeheim found a way. And then it was, we're gonna get to the tournament, we're gonna play a 2-3 zone, and you're probably not going to be able to figure it out. And they beat the what out of San Diego State.
Yeah.
They beat West Virginia doing it in that tournament, and then lost to a Houston team that flip a coin, they could have won the national championship that year. But anyway, that was what Syracuse basketball was for, I'd probably say a 6, 7, 8 year stretch, in the ACC. And then obviously that, as you just put it, it was the tail end of what Syracuse was at the time. And it has been really fascinating to watch it from afar and now be a part of it kind of from afar and drop in. And I think when you're living it every day, it feels like a really big change. And I'm not saying there haven't been really big changes. Anytime, you have somebody like Jim Boeheim move on, it's going to be seismic in some way. And I think you see that with not only in Syracuse, but in all these programs around the country that have had figureheads leave, not just head coaches leave. Um, but I do also think that there's a lot that stayed the same. And like Everett Autry on the bench is not necessarily different. I do think that this is probably the first year that I look at this team and this program and feel like it is truly his. And I think talking to people around the ACC and talking to people that know him better than I do, they feel that way too. And I know that that goes a lot of different ways. I'm sure you have listeners who hate that and love that and all that. But I do think that for the program to get kind of change into what it's going to be, you had to, eventually have a program that felt and tasted fully like his. And here we are, and there's a lot of season left to go to find out what that's going to look like.
Do you think the people within the ACC are saying it's his program because he finally got his fingerprints on the transfer portal? He finally brought in his so-called recruiting class in a way, or is it more of a X's and O's thing that they're saying that he's finally established?
I think it's a little bit of both. I do
Yeah,
think that in the era of transfer portal, in that world that we live in, it is part of that. And it always felt like, at least to me, and again, I'm a little bit more outside looking in. Like, you're someone who's in
yeah,
it, every single day, but it did feel like there was one foot in the Boeheim era, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, Jim Boeheim's a legend for great reason, but it was one foot in that era and one foot in this one. And So I do think that the roster construction piece of it, and obviously, we're not playing 2-3 zone 100, 99% of the time. That's part of it too. But that's been different, for years now. But I do think that when you look at this roster, it feels like his. And I think the way that they've played defensively, on
Yep.
average, relative by really any defensive metric you look at on a national scale, shows that that's his baby. Like he's done that. And I'm excited to see what the next few weeks look like. I know it's a weird moment for us to be talking about them, and I'm sure that you're living it. People aren't happy,
Yes,
but
yes.
I'll be very interested to see what the next 3-4 weeks look like for this team.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting 2 weeks. You have a thrilling win over Tennessee,
Why?
and then you drop the ball against what is a good Hofstra team. You know all about those sneaky sneaky small schools that can really trick you. And it certainly did that for Syracuse. And flipping it back to the ACC, because really that's now where the attention is for Adrian Autry. And you get the Tennessee win, but now you do need to get some serious wins in the ACC. The problem, though, and I wonder how much of this was the problem when you were there at Syracuse, the big win, the quality wins in the ACC are harder to come by. I think the ACC is still a strong conference. I think it gets unnecessarily shot down at times. I know it's not a powerhouse to what the Big Ten or the SEC is doing basketball wise or the Big 12, but I feel like there's still plenty of strong teams in the conference.
Well, we're having a much different conversation on December 15th of 2025 than we were on December 15th of 2024. And I don't need to tell you that.
Yes,
You
yes,
can look at the way the league played in the non-conference last year. They were, just the numbers. Win-loss was horrific. They
yeah,
got crushed in the ACC SEC Challenge. I'm not saying anything Syracuse fans don't know. I think the good thing is losing to Hofstra really hurts a resume, and a resume doesn't
yes,
matter on December 15th. You've got to win a lot of games in the conference, no matter what, to be an NCAA tournament team. But I do think that the ACC can get 8, 9, 10 teams in the tournament. I'm not saying they're going to when the dust settles, but they have not. On December 15th of last year, they had played themselves collectively out of that conversation completely. We're
yeah,
not in that world, anymore. And Duke, Carolina, and Louisville are, clearly the class of the league as it stands right now based on what they've done. I think NC State is a really good team. I know they haven't beaten a good team yet, but they played well against, good teams, at least offensively. Virginia is, one of the stories of the college basketball season. I think as we speak, they're in the top 25 as of this afternoon, and they probably should have been there already. Their style, the way they play offensively, the way they pass the ball, is fun. Miami is incredibly talented. And that's before we, talk about Clemson, the number of wins that SMU has. I mean, we could go on and on and on down the list. I haven't even mentioned Syracuse yet because they're not one of those teams that's in the tournament if we started it tomorrow. Doesn't matter. But the point
yeah.
being, generally, is in an 18 game ACC schedule, which is what they're playing this year, which is the change, I think, for the first time in like 4 or 5 years in an 18 game schedule, if you win 13-14, a lot to ask, but win 13-14, I think you're in a much, much better place than you were last year, which was if you won 12 or 13, you still had no shot,
Yeah.
out of that percentage of the schedule at least.
And something else that has drastically shifted since Jim Boeheim era and that 2021 season we were talking about is college landscape entirely with NIL. We just saw Syracuse play a Thanksgiving tournament solely based off of NIL money and revenue that they would get in. They may
Yeah, I
not
heard
tell you
about
that,
that.
but yeah, that was a mess. Didn't work out for the team. They should have beat Houston. But again, the reason they were there was certainly for the money. But in terms of the recruiting and how Syracuse is getting players, I think when you were here in Syracuse, there was still that we're going to get the guy nobody hears about, mold him into the Michael Carter Williams, really grit and tough kind of guy. I think now we're seeing a big shift. I think it's because they have to do this where it's let's go get at the Sadiq White, let's go get the Donnie Freeman, the 5 star. Do you think Syracuse could still go into its roots and develop those, less prominent names?
Well, I think you have to do both. I mean,
Yeah,
and that's the reality. Look, the talent pool is bigger than it's ever been before. You look at good teams around the country, and to be fair, if you're a Michigan or a Duke, you're maybe at a little bit of a different scenario. But if you look at teams I don't know, 5 through 25 in Ken Palm, right? That are great teams that are, a lot of them are capable of going to a Final Four and contending for a national championship. They're built with, maybe one big time recruit, a lot of transfers, guys who can shoot it with length. A lot of teams, especially in the ACC, are delving into the European route. I think that is something that I mean, I love Marek Dolezaj. That's a long time ago. But those are the kinds of things that when you talk about roster construction, there are more places that you can pull to get good players than there ever have been before. And when you look at this now, the way that the finances have changed even in the last year to year and a half, you're talking about what becomes a much more level playing field. And I think when you look around the ACC, the difference, not only in terms of wins and losses between this year and last year, is it's a little bit more of a level playing field. There's they are making a decision, not every team, but teams are making decisions to allocate funding to basketball versus, football, and other sports. And so because of that, the rosters are better. And you look at a Virginia and you look at Wake Forest and you look at SMU and Clemson and kind of the jumps that some of these teams have taken between last year and this year. And I would put Syracuse in this basket. When you have more money to pay people, you're going to get better players. And now it's about going out there and winning more games. And we'll see what happens. But from the Syracuse perspective of it, I do think that Red Autry has shown that he can recruit. I mean,
Yeah.
you look at in terms of 4 and 5 stars and all of this transfers, he has good players on this roster. And it's not that it's a perfect roster. I don't think there are many teams in the ACC with perfect rosters. But now it's about, okay, what happens on the court from here, and we'll see what happens.
I think that's kind of the thing that's holding people back from really, liking Adrian Autry is that he hasn't really delivered it X's and O's wise on the floor yet. And of course, we were talking about the double overtime and WAR Sports Talk before we started recording. You'll get those callers that, don't like Adrian Autry. They're saying it's time to move on. I think this is a crazy question, but I think it's worth the conversation. You got to give him 6, 8 years before you get into those realms. I know the tournament drought is what really is bugging everybody. The class that just graduated was like the first class in many, many years not to see tournament basketball. But especially in college athletics, no matter what sport it is, time has to be your friend in a way to develop.
Well, I think there's something to be said for stability
Yeah.
in any program, and I think you see this in any sport. If you fire somebody, just fire somebody. And again,
Yeah.
the people that call in, I've taken those calls plenty.
Yep.
There's an entirely reasonable passion when it comes down to it. I also think too is that X's and O's thing that people say, and again, I understand. Like I watch some of you watch the players era games and stuff like that. And you're trying to like you want to see cohesive offense and you want to see movement. And you want to see these things, and even down the stretch against Hofstra the other day, watching that, I get it. But he can coach defense. I mean, the way that they play defensively, it's not an accident. Like he didn't just stumble into that. And so I think the identity of this program is one that, I'm not sure there's a full answer to what it is yet under Adrian Autry. And I think that's okay. And again, we'll see what happens. I'm no athletic director. I'm not going to pretend to be or anything like that. But the roster last year wasn't good enough. I mean, at the end of the day, right? We can have as many conversations as we want. Now the roster, in theory, is good enough. They haven't been healthy enough, maybe, to prove it. And maybe, again, I don't need to tell Syracuse fans if you're healthy. Donnie Freeman's a part of these games over these last few weeks, month really. Is it different? Does it matter? No. But again, I'm just so fascinated to see kind of what the next month looks like because I think it does inform a lot about the 6, 7, 8 years that you're talking about too.
Yeah, certainly does, and that's going to be the money making zone here once that ACC play starts. I want to flip gears to Syracuse women's basketball because, like you said, you got the chance to call their big time win in the ACC SEC Challenge against Auburn. That was an exciting game, and for me at least, I think I've been really super blessed and privileged to see the start of the Felicia Leggett Jack era and just how fascinating of a coach that she is, and I've had the pleasure of talking with her a few times, and great person to have a conversation with. Syracuse women's basketball when you left, wasn't in a perfect spot, but I think from your first experience, I don't know if that was your first experience, but for the first experience game you called in a while, I gotta say you probably were blown away.
They played awesome. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, I end up doing the game that's been their best win of the season.
yeah,
But they've won a lot of games. I mean,
yeah.
the Michigan game, Michigan's Michigan. But
Very good
I
team.
also think that talking with people around the program, that's a game that they were never in it at that point, but that's a game that's a learning experience, and it's the kind of game that if it came around again, they'll get a chance in the ACC a couple of times to play teams like that. They've, uh, to me, with Felia and the way that she's played and the experience she's had with Darius, the way that she's played in the experience, like they are the kinds of players that can play in big time games like that, and get results in a big time game like that. I would just imagine, just again, I was around the program for like 48 hours, but I would imagine
Yes.
the next time one of those big time games comes around, we're having a much different conversation. And then I haven't even, Uche Izoje is unreal. I mean, you're talking about in this league, the kind of five that can change games consistently. They have a deep bench, plays everybody. They're gonna have to shoot it better. I mean, I'm not sure they're going to. We'll see. But and this goes back to the men's conversation, right?
Mhm.
That we were just having, where I do think, especially in the year 2025, if you don't shoot the three well and you don't have an efficient offense, regardless of what you do defensively, um, it's going to be really hard to win. And I did Louisville earlier this year, and they're taking the highest percentage of threes in the country, of anybody on the men's side. With Pat Kelsey and what they're doing, and there are nights where it doesn't matter who you are, you cannot beat them. They will just make more threes than you can keep up with. And that's why they can win the national championship. It's also why they can lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament to a group of five team. Um, and that's that. But I do think that going back to the Syracuse side of things on the women's side is they're going to have to shoot it a little bit better to hang with the teams on the nights where even when they're playing good defense, the three's going in on the other end.
Certainly, and I feel a Sophie Burrows it could be the key to unlocking
Yeah.
success long term, maybe tournament success for this team. Before we jump to more of your time here on the hill, just I got to talk men's lacrosse because you call a great game men's lacrosse game on Westwood One. We love listening to you on the radio come Final Four time. It's got to be the year for Gary Gait, right? I mean, this is this Spalina's a
Woo.
senior. It's got to happen for him, right?
Boy, so I did champ weekend last year, and
Yep.
you sit down with him and the players around this program, and look, I thought that semifinal was unfortunate. Maryland, John Tillman in May is John Tillman in May. I hoped that they were going to play better than they did, and I thought that similar to the Syracuse Michigan women's conversation, it's just like they were just never quite in the game, and then they never did. But then you sit there and you watch them against Princeton the week before, and you're like, yeah, this is a team that can go win a national championship. There's no reason why Syracuse in 2026, geez,
Yeah.
can't go win a national championship. There's
Yeah.
zero reason based on what they seem to be bringing in. I don't know a ton on December 15th, but what they seem to be bringing in, what obviously what you said, what they're bringing back, particularly offensively in that group, and it's to me also you think about it when you talk to enough coaches, you talk about learning how to win, and they kind of had to learn how to get back in the tournament. They had to learn how to get deep into a tournament. Last year's hump, and look, I know the Syracuse lacrosse fan better than anybody, having been one, is, you know, uh, championships are the standard. But when you haven't been a championship weekend, the way that they hadn't been a championship weekend, that was to me, and just again, talking to people around the program, being around it for a weekend, such a watershed emotional moment in so many ways. And for Gary Gate to be the one to do it, is an amazing thing. And yeah, you're right. There's no reason why they can't win a national championship.
It's I mean, one thing I love about lacrosse, it's still a true college sport to me because you got that senior class. They've been on a ride, really since freshman year together, and there's been a lot of hype. There will be pressure. There's no doubt about it for Gary Gates' group come this year, but it should be an exciting season, no doubt about it. Swing it back to your time on the Hill. I know you got to call, ton of games, super great experiences. Let's stick to the home. What was your favorite dome memory? And it can be you know, I don't know how many 9 p.m. games you had, but we were having quite a few, and a midnight walk out of the dome in December or January is not pleasant, so it can be a snowy walk back to the station.
Yeah, character building walks back to
Yes,
the station.
equipment and all.
Shoot, man, best I think I there are a couple things that come to mind. I think 2020, the lacrosse season leading into COVID, so the one that
Yeah,
was stopped short. They were the number one team in the country and they
yeah,
were 5-0. And every time I tell that story, I always joke that like in 20 years, I'll pretend they were 15-0 and the number one team in the
yeah.
country. But they, that season was really special. Like when you're a junior, that's kind of your lacrosse season, to be a part of, and that team was really fun. Like it was just cool to be a part of. They beat Army in a comeback in the Dome. I think maybe 2 weeks before the world shut down. 9-8, came back, won it. Thousands of people obviously in the Dome. That's a kind of game that I'll never forget. And I do think that was, you talk about, I mean, shoot, we're doing a podcast episode on December 15th, the middle basketball season, in the middle of all the transfer portal football stuff. And you're asking about lacrosse. And it does speak to how special of a lacrosse place that is. And that was, I remember that. And I'm sure everybody's had this experience. Like, I remember that being the day where I finally understood, as someone who wasn't from Central New York. I knew it was a big deal. I knew that they were ranked. I knew it was, but like to be in it and look around on that particular, it must have been a Saturday afternoon, and say, oh, this really, really matters here. I don't know if it's my favorite game, but it was shoots first one that came to mind, so it probably tells you something.
Yeah, certainly. And I couldn't agree more. I came in not knowing a whole lot about lacrosse, and I've really fallen in love with the sport, partially because of the fan base that does live here in Central New York and in Syracuse. And then last one for you: is there a game or a moment where you're like, oh, I wish the Cuse had back. I wish they could have gotten this result or that result, and they just couldn't get it done.
Whew, that's a good one.
I know this swings back into the archives for you.
I love it. Yeah, my senior year 2020 Clemson, first game they played in front of fans that year. It was kind of a brutal season in the end. But
Yeah.
they were within set. They led Clemson in the first half, I think. They were within 7 in the third quarter in front of like 18,000, which felt like 200,000 at that period of time, and they just couldn't do it. Like Garrett Schrader got sacked. It was like a strip sack
Uh,
fumble, and Andrew Booth picked it up and scored a touchdown. Uh, that would be the one. It actually didn't matter at all. Like they were never going to go to a bowl, but we thought that was going to be the one. And then maybe I would like axe COVID for like at least a couple more months, see if that 2020 lacrosse
yeah.
team would have won the national championship.
Yeah. Certainly. It's funny. Mine could also be a Clemson Syracuse football moment as well. There's
Yeah.
been a few of
Well,
those.
you do enough Clemson Syracuse football games. I promise you, they're all going to be close.
Yes, exactly. And it's kind of seems how it works out. But something always bad happens. It can never be even if
Uh,
you win, something always bad turns out. Cooper, thanks so much for taking the time. This is a bitty part of your schedule. We really appreciate you coming back onto the WAR airways for a moment.
AJ, I said it was a great honor from the beginning. I really do mean it, and I'd love to do it again anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.